Welcome, fellow radiation oncology enthusiasts, to Rad Onc Smart Review RadBio Edition. We're about to embark on a pretty deep dive into something that truly underpins, well, pretty much every single treatment decision we make in the clinic.
That's exactly right. Today, we're really dissecting the mathematical backbone of radiation oncology, the science of fractionation. Why do we go to all the trouble of giving many small doses of radiation instead of, say, one large, seemingly simpler one? The answer, the really profound answer, lies embedded in these numbers, and understanding these precise relationships is what turns a simple physical dose into a powerful, targeted biological effect. And mastering this isn't just about passing an exam, although it's important for that too. It's really about becoming a truly intuitive and, effective clinician.
And for anyone out there who may be like me, perhaps venued into medicine thinking, phew, finally I'm done with math. Well, surprise, here we are. But trust me, as much as it might feel like revisiting calculus class sometimes, truly getting a handle on these calculations, it doesn't just check a box for your board exams. It fundamentally changes how you understand radiation biology, how you plan treatments, and how you genuinely protect your patients while, optimizing tumor control. It's really what separates a good plan from a truly exceptional one.
Exactly. Our mission today is to basically demystify and master the calculation of biologically effective dose, or BED, using that crucial alpha to beta ratio. This isn't just some abstract equation, it's really a lens through which we can compare wildly different treatment schedules on a truly equivalent biological basis. We're going to learn how to precisely determine isoeffective doses, which is just vital for respecting normal tissue constraints when we're thinking about changing our fractionation schemes. Maybe moving from conventional to hyperfractionated approaches. We'll even explore the pretty intriguing process of working backward, deriving an alpha to beta ratio from existing clinical data, which is quite powerful for research and just understanding tissue behavior better.
And as if that weren't enough, we're also going to tackle a very real-world clinical challenge. How do we adjust the total dose needed to account for tumor repopulation during those long treatment courses? This is such a critical factor, especially for rapidly growing tumors where, well, treatment breaks can have significant, really detrimental impacts on outcomes. So yeah, grab your calculator, maybe a cup of coffee, and let's get started.
Okay, to begin, let's just quickly revisit the cornerstone of radiation biology, the linear quadratic model, the LQ model. Now, this model isn't just theoretical, it's our fundamental understanding of how radiation actually kills cells. It describes cell survival as having two primary components, and each plays a pretty distinct role. First, we have that linear component. It's directly proportional to the dose, and it's governed by a factor we call alpha. This alpha component represents immediate, lethal, and typically non-repairable DNA damage. Think double-strand breaks. It's really the dominant component at low doses per fraction.
Right. And then there's the quadratic part. That part is proportional to the square of the dose, and it's governed by a factor we call beta. This beta component represents more like sublethal damage that, if left alone, cells might actually repair. But if enough of this sublethal damage accumulates or interacts, it can become lethal. The crucial distinction here, and this is really key, is that this beta-type damage can be repaired if cells are given enough time between radiation doses. This repairability is the absolute key to why fractionation works its magic.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really fascinating and super clinically relevant. The relative contribution of these two components, alpha and beta, is elegantly captured by their ratio, the alpha to beta ratio. This ratio is the absolute bedrock for understanding why fractionating a total radiation dose into many smaller daily doses can spare late-responding normal tissues far more effectively than it spares tumors or, early-responding normal tissues. This differential sparing, this really remarkable ability to protect healthy, vital organs while still delivering a tumoricidal dose to the cancer, that's the true magic of fractionation. It's why radiation oncology isn't just about, blasting a tumor with one massive dose and calling it a day. Think about it. Before fractionation was widely adopted, radiation therapy was, way more toxic. It often led to severe late effects because that single large dose just overwhelmed the repair capacity of healthy tissues. Fractionation was a truly revolutionary leap forward in safely delivering radiation.
And the biologically effective dose, or BED, is the powerful, really indispensable tool we use to quantify this differential effect. It's absolutely vital to understand that BED is not a physical dose. You don't measure it in gray with a dosimeter like you would measure the dose to a patient on the treatment machine. Instead, it's a calculated value. It's a conceptual metric, really. It represents the total biological impact, the full biological punch of a particular radiation schedule on a specific tissue. This allows us to conceptually compare and contrast different fractionation schemes and understand their true biological equivalence or difference on a really meaningful biological basis. Not just looking at the raw, unadjusted total physical dose. It's the ultimate conversion kind of from a physical quantity to a biological consequence.
Okay, let's unpack the formula that allows us to do this, because this single equation, honestly, is the foundation for almost everything we'll discuss today. It's derived directly from the linear quadratic model, and it's one you absolutely positively must memorize and be able to apply effortlessly. The formula for BED is total physical dose, capital D, multiplied by the quantity of, open parenthesis, 1 plus the dose per fraction, lowercase d, divided by the alpha to beta ratio, close parenthesis. So mathematically, BED equals D times, open parent, 1 plus D divided by alpha over beta, close parent.
Let's just break down those essential components one more time, just for absolute clarity. Capital D is your total physical dose, typically measured in gray. That's just the sum of all your daily fractions. Simple enough, lowercase d is the dose per fraction. So the amount of radiation delivered in each individual treatment session, also in gray. And finally, the alpha to beta ratio, often written as alpha divided by beta, is that crucial factor representing the inherent fractionation sensitivity of the specific tissue we're looking at. It's basically a quantitative measure of how sensitive that particular tissue is to changes in the size of each individual radiation dose.
You know, what's truly fascinating here, and really a cornerstone for understanding BED and fractionation, is the key rule of thumb for these alpha to beta ratios. Early responding tissues, think of rapidly dividing cells like those in your skin, your oral mucosa, the lining of your gut, and importantly, most solid tumors generally have a high alpha to beta ratio. This ratio is typically around 10 grays. So what does this high ratio actually tell us? It means these tissues and tumors are relatively less sensitive to changes in the size of each individual fraction. Their cell-killing response is dominated more by the linear, the alpha component, meaning they respond more proportionally to the total dose delivered. So yeah, larger fraction sizes do increase damage, but they don't disproportionately crank it up as much compared to a smaller fraction for these tissues. You could say the shoulders of their cell survival curves are relatively shallow.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, and this is truly where that differential sparing comes, and late responding tissues have a low alpha to beta ratio. These are the tissues that show toxicity months to years after treatment. Think spinal cord, lung, kidney, brain, bladder, those critical organs. Their alpha to beta ratio is typically much lower, around 2 to 3 gray. This critically important low ratio signifies that these tissues are very sensitive to changes in fraction size. Even a seemingly small increase in the dose per fraction can lead to a disproportionately large jump in biological damage to these late-responding organs. This is because the quadratic, the beta component of cell kill, becomes much more dominant at larger fraction sizes for these tissues. Their capacity for repair between fractions is just more easily saturated. This is precisely why conventional fractionation, with those small daily doses like 1.8 to 2 gray, is so incredibly important for protecting these vital, slowly repairing organs. It gives them time, allows their sublethal damage to be effectively repaired between fractions, preserving their function long term.
Okay, let's solidify this with a quick mini case study. This is exactly the kind of problem you'll see on your boards, and it really puts the formula into action. Imagine a patient being treated for head and neck cancer, a very common scenario. A standard regimen might be 70 gray delivered in 35 fractions. So this means the dose per fraction, lowercase d, is 2 grays. 70 divided by 35 is 2. Our task here is to calculate the BED for both the tumor, which we'll treat as an early responding tissue, and for the late responding spinal cord, a critical organ at risk in many head and neck plans. This lets us quantify that differential impact we were just talking about.
Right, let's crunch those numbers. First up, the BED for the tumor. For this, we'll use its characteristic high alpha to beta ratio of 10 grays. So using our formula, BED equals D times the quantity of 1 plus D divided by the alpha to beta ratio. Here, D is 70 gray and D is 2 gray. So BED for the tumor equals 70 gray multiplied by, open parenthesis, 1 plus 2 gray divided by 10 grays, close parenthesis. Okay, that simplifies to 70 multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus 0.2, 2 divided by 10, which is 70 multiplied by 1.2. And that gives us 84 grays when using an alpha to beta of 10. So that's the calculated biological effect delivered right to the tumor.
Perfect. Now let's contrast that sharply with the BED for the spinal cord, our classic late responding tissue. For the spinal cord, we'll use that lower alpha to beta ratio of 2 grays, plugging these values into our BED formula where D is still 70 gray and D is still 2 gray. The BED for late effects equals 70 gray multiplied by, open parentheses, 1 plus 2 gray divided by 2 grays, close parenthesis. This simplifies beautifully, actually. It's 70 multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus 1 because 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that is 70 multiplied by 2, which equals 140 grays using an alpha to beta of 2.
Wow. Yeah, this calculation is absolutely fundamental because it immediately reveals the power of fractionation. Just looking at the physical dose, 70 gray, doesn't tell you the whole story at all. But when you apply the BED formula, you instantly see it. The same physical 70 gray delivers a BED of 84 gray to the tumor, but a whopping 140 gray to the spinal cord. This stark difference highlights how a standard 2 gray per fraction regimen, while delivering a certain physical dose, inherently delivers a disproportionately higher biological effect to those highly sensitive, late-responding normal tissues. It really emphasizes why we have to be so meticulously mindful of their exquisite sensitivity to changes in fraction size. It's this quantification, this biological punch, that makes BED such an indispensable tool. It also explains why we keep those normal tissue dose constraints for low alpha-beta organs so tight.
Okay, so if we understand that critical differential effect, the obvious next step in clinical practice is, well, how do we actually use this knowledge to optimize treatment? The real power of BED in the clinic isn't just about calculating the effect of a schedule we've already decided on. It's about proactively helping us modify existing treatment plans or even design completely new ones, all while scrupulously respecting those crucial normal tissue tolerance limits. And this is exactly where the concept of isoeffect calculations becomes absolutely indispensable.
Yeah, this raises a profoundly important question for clinical decision-making, doesn't it? How exactly do we use these isoeffect calculations to find a new total dose that is, equally safe or biologically equivalent for a nearby late-responding organ? Especially if we're thinking about changing our fractionation scheme, like, moving from a standard regimen to maybe a more aggressive hypofractionated one where each daily dose is larger, or maybe even the other way around sometimes. This is all about maintaining that therapeutic window, even when we alter the delivery schedule.
The principle here is actually elegantly simple, but it's profoundly powerful. We first calculate the BED for the late responding normal tissue using a known, safe, and already established standard fractionation schedule. This is our reference point. This calculated BED from the standard regimen then becomes our definitive tolerance budget, or as you said, our biological speed limit for that particular organ. It's basically the maximum biological effect we deem acceptable based on, decades of clinical experience for that specific tissue.
Okay, so once we've established that biological speed limit, that BED tolerance, what's next? We then take that established BED tolerance and we calculate what new total dose, using our new proposed fraction size, will produce the exact same BED. Right. So in essence, we are setting the BED of the standard regimen equal to the BED of the new modified regimen, and then just solving for the unknown total dose in that new scheme. This makes sure that even though the physical doses or fraction sizes might change, the biological impact on that critical normal tissue stays constant and crucially stays within those established safe limits. This is really the bedrock of safe dose escalation or safe hyperfractionation.
Exactly. Let's work through a practical example that really mirrors real-world scenarios. This one, or variations of it, often comes up on board exams because it involves solving for an unknown, which tests the application. So imagine a standard palliative spine treatment. Typically, that might be 30 grays delivered in 10 fractions. This means the dose per fraction, D, is 3 grays per fraction, 30 divided by 10. Now, let's say a physician wants to use a shorter, maybe more convenient regimen for the patient of just 5 fractions instead of 10. The critical question here is, what is the maximum total dose they can deliver in this new 5-fraction regimen without exceeding the known safe biological effect on the spinal cord that we get from the standard 30 gray in 10 fractions? And for the spinal cord being a late responding tissue, we'll assume an alpha to beta ratio of 2 grays.
Okay, let's break this down step by step. This is important. First, we absolutely must calculate the BED tolerance of the spinal cord from the established standard regimen. That's our benchmark. The total dose D is 30 gray, and the dose per fraction D is 3 gray. The alpha beta is 2. So the BED for the cord is 30 gray multiplied by the quantity of open paren 1 plus 3 gray divided by 2 gray close paren. Okay, 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. So this equals 30 multiplied by open paren 1 plus 1.5 close paren, which is 30 multiplied by 2.5. And 30 times 2.5 gives us 75 gray using the alpha to beta of 2. This 75 gray BED value is now our definitive biological speed limit for the spinal cord in this scenario. We absolutely cannot exceed this PED in our new regimen if we want to maintain equivalent safety and, avoid serious late complications like myelopathy.
Perfect. That's step 1, establish the limit. Next, we set up the equation for the new 5-fraction regimen to be isoeffective. We need to find the new total dose, let's call it D sub 2. We know the number of fractions in this new scheme, N sub 2, is 5. Therefore, the new dose per fraction, d sub 2, will be d sub 2 divided by 5. Total dose over number of fractions. We then set the new BED equal to our calculated limit of 75 gray. The formula looks like this. 75 equals d sub 2 multiplied by, open parenthesis, 1 plus, open parenthesis again, d sub 2 divided by 5, close parenthesis, all of that divided by 2, close the main parenthesis. Okay, let's simplify that inner fraction first. D sub 2 divided by 5, all divided by 2. That becomes d sub 2 divided by 10. Right, so the equation simplifies nicely to 75 equals d sub 2 multiplied by, open parenthesis, 1 plus d sub 2 divided by 10, close parenthesis.
All right, this is where it gets a little algebraically interesting, because to solve for d sub 2, we actually need to solve a quadratic equation. Remember those. Let's expand those terms first. Distribute the d sub 2. 75 equals d sub 2 times 1, which is d sub 2, plus d sub 2 times d sub 2 over 10, which is d sub 2 squared divided by 10. Now, to clear that fraction, make it easier to work with, let's multiply the entire equation by 10. This gives us 750 equals 10 times d sub 2 plus d sub 2 squared. Okay, now, rearranging this into the standard quadratic form, x squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we get d sub 2 squared plus 10 d sub 2 minus 750 equals 0. Okay, deep breath. Using the quadratic formula, which, for anyone needing a quick refresher, is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Plugging in our values, A1, B10, C750, we find the D sub 2, the positive solution that makes sense for a dose, is approximately 22.8 gray.
Exactly. So what this tells us is, to maintain the same biological effect on the spinal cord, a total dose of approximately 22.8 gray delivered in 5 fractions, which, if you work it out, is about 4.56 grays per fraction, would be isoeffective. It's considered biologically equivalent to the standard 30 gray in 10 fractions, specifically for the spinal cord. This calculation allows for truly precise dose adjustments when we're modifying schedules. It's not just a guess or a rough estimate, it's an informed, quantitative decision based on radiobiology.
Now, here's a really critical point, and one that highlights the nuances, the subtleties of BED calculations. It's absolutely crucial to consider the impact of this change on the tumor as well. Because, well, it's not always a win-win scenario where you automatically improve the therapeutic ratio just by matching the normal tissue BED. We have to check if we've actually gained a therapeutic advantage, or maybe even lost some effect on the tumor. So if the tumor in this palliative spine case has a high alpha to beta ratio, say 10 gray, let's calculate the BED delivered to the tumor by both regimens. Okay, first for the original standard regimen. The tumor BED is 30 gray multiplied by the quantity 1 plus 3 divided by 10. Alpha beta is 10 now. That's 30 multiplied by 1 plus 0.3, so 30 multiplied by 1.3 for a total of 39 grays using an alpha to beta of 10. That's the tumor hit with the standard plan. Now for the new regimen that we specifically designed to be spinal cord isoeffective. The tumor BED is 22.8 gray multiplied by the quantity 1 plus 4.56 divided by 10. Remember, D was 4.56 shared, so this is 22.8 multiplied by 1 plus 0.456, which is 22.8 multiplied by 1.456. And that comes out to approximately 33.2 gray using an alpha to beta of 10.
And here's the crucial insight, the punchline, really. In this specific case, by changing to a 5-fraction regimen that was specifically designed to be equivalent for the late-responding spinal cord, we've actually delivered a less biologically effective dose to the tumor. The tumor BED dropped from 39 gray down to 33.2 gray. This powerfully demonstrates that simply making a schedule isoeffective for late effects doesn't automatically mean you've maintained, let alone improved, the effect on the tumor. You have to check both sides of the coin tumor and normal tissue. This kind of detailed, nuanced calculation is absolutely critical for designing modern hypofractionated trials, for example. It ensures that you are truly dose-escalating the BED to the tumor while staying precisely within the BED tolerance for the normal tissues. Or, in a palliative case like this, maybe accepting a lower tumor BED is okay, but you need to know that's what you're doing. It's the essence of therapeutic ratio management.
Yeah, I like to think of it like tuning an orchestra, maybe. You could spend all your time tuning just one section, say the violins, get them to perfect pitch. And that's essential, right? But if you don't, then consider how those perfectly tuned violins sound in the overall harmony of the entire piece. How they interact with the brass and the percussion, the whole song might still sound off. Or maybe even create some unpleasant dissonance. Similarly, getting the normal tissue tolerance exactly right using BED is absolutely key, but you must also check the tumor effect to ensure your modified regimen still achieves your desired therapeutic goal. This holistic view, driven by these precise calculations, is really what makes you a sophisticated and truly effective radiation oncologist. It's not just following recipes.
Right. Now, sometimes in clinical practice, or perhaps more commonly, when you're facing your board exams, you might encounter scenarios where you need to work backward. It's a bit like being a detective, solving a puzzle. We can actually use established clinical data to estimate or derive the alpha to beta ratio for a specific tissue if we have enough information about how it responded to different fractionation schemes. This is incredibly useful for characterizing new tissues or maybe validating our existing models.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for board exams, I think, because it tests your conceptual understanding just as much as your calculation skills. It's not just plugging numbers into a formula. So if a clinical trial or maybe extensive clinical experience has definitively established that two different fractionation schedules produce the exact same biological outcome, like, say, the same rate of a specific late complication, or perhaps the same local control rate for a tumor, then we can confidently assume their biologically effective doses are equal for that endpoint. And by setting their BED formulas equal to each other, with the alpha to beta ratio as our unknown variable, we can then solve for that ratio. This allows us to characterize the fractionation sensitivity of that particular tissue directly from observed clinical effects, which is, well, incredibly powerful.
Let's walk through a classic board-style example of this. Let's say a hypothetical clinical trial shows that a standard regimen of 70 grays delivered in 35 fractions is considered isoeffective for causing a specific late complication compared with another regimen of 56 grays delivered in 16 fractions. Okay, so for the first regimen, the dose per fraction D is 70 divided by 35, which is 2 gray. For the second regimen, the dose per fraction D is 56 divided by 16, which is 3.5 gray per fraction. The question is, based on these two regimens being isoeffective for this late effect, what is the alpha to beta ratio for this specific late effect? This is about deducing the tissue's fundamental radiation behavior from the data.
All right, let's set this up. To solve this, we set the BEDs of the two regimens equal to each other because the problem states they are isoeffective for the late complication. So for the first regimen, BED is 70 multiplied by the quantity of open paren 1 plus 2 divided by the alpha to beta ratio, close paren. This must equal the BED of the second regimen, 56 multiplied by the quantity of open paren 1 plus 3.5 divided by the alpha to beta ratio, close paren. Now, we need to carefully expand these terms to isolate the alpha-beta ratio. On the left side, distributing the 70 gives us 70 plus 7 times 2, 140 divided by the alpha to beta ratio. On the right side, distributing the 56 gives us 56 plus 56 times 3.5, 196 divided by the alpha to beta ratio. Okay, our goal is to isolate the alpha to beta ratio. Let's gather the constant terms on one side and the terms with the alpha to beta ratio on the other. So let's move 56 to the left, 70 minus 56. And let's move the 140 alpha beta term to the right. Equals 196 divided by the alpha to beta ratio minus 140 divided by the alpha to beta ratio. This simplifies quite nicely now. 70 minus 56 is 14, and 196 minus 140 is 56. So we have 14 equals 56 divided by the alpha to beta ratio. Therefore, to find the alpha to beta ratio, we just rearrange. Alpha to beta ratio equals 56 divided by 14, and 56 divided by 14 is 4, so the alpha to beta ratio is 4 gray.
Exactly, and this result, 4 gray, is highly significant. It confirms that the tissue we were analyzing, the one experiencing these late complications, exhibits classic late responding behavior. An alpha to beta ratio of 4 gray fits perfectly within that low alpha to beta range, typically cited as 2 to 3 grays, maybe up to 5, that we discussed earlier for late responding normal tissues. This example shows precisely how mathematical derivation, when it's grounded in solid clinical observation, aligns perfectly with our biological understanding of tissue sensitivity. It's how we build the evidence base for our fractionation guidelines and confirm our models.
Okay, so far, our BED calculations have sort of assumed that the treatment courses have similar overall durations. However, the standard BED formula, while incredibly powerful, really works best for comparing schedules when the overall treatment times are roughly comparable. For longer treatment courses, especially in tumors that are known to proliferate rapidly thinking, like many head and neck cancers or certain lymphomas, the repopulation of tumor cells during the actual treatment period can significantly diminish the overall biological effect of the radiation we're delivering. This means the dose you meticulously plan and deliver actually becomes less effective because the tumor cells are literally growing back in between fractions, or worse, during unplanned treatment breaks. This is a very real, very frustrating clinical problem we face.
Yeah, it definitely is. And this raises another profoundly important clinical question. How do we actually account for and ideally adjust our dose to overcome this tumor repopulation? It's not just an academic exercise, it's a critical factor in maintaining local control for our patients, especially in curative settings. Now, a common and pretty well established clinical rule of thumb, especially for these rapidly proliferating tumors like squamous cell carcinomas of the head and neck, is to add a specific compensatory dose for any treatment prolongation that happens beyond a certain kickoff time. This kickoff time is typically considered to be around 21 to 28 days into the treatment course. After this point, tumor cells can really accelerate their repopulation rate. This is often thought to be due to, a reduction in the initial tumor burden leading to less contact inhibition, or maybe a decrease in cell cycle time for the surviving cells. They just start growing faster.
And the rule itself is actually quite straightforward, and it's really essential to commit this one to memory, particularly for your boards and just for everyday practice. You need to add a dose equivalent of 0.6 grays per day. 0.6 grays per day. For every single day the treatment is extended beyond that initial kickoff period of about 21 to 28 days. This 0.6 grays per day value is an average, of course, but it's been empirically derived from clinical studies and seems to effectively offset the biological impact of that accelerated tumor regrowth in many cases. And to help you remember this for your boards and beyond, we came up with a simple kind of sticky mnemonic for you. Repopulation rapid, 0.6 for the fix. Say it with me, repopulation rapid, 0.6 for the fix. It's just a quick, easy way to recall that critical number when you're under pressure, maybe in an exam or making a quick clinical decision.
That's a good one. Let's apply this critical concept to a real-world scenario. Consider a standard head and neck cancer regimen. 70 grays delivered in 35 fractions, which typically takes 7 weeks to deliver. Now, imagine this patient, unfortunately, experiences an unplanned 1-week treatment break. Life happens. Let's say this break starts after week 4 of their treatment. Maybe they got sick, maybe the machine went down, whatever the reason. We need to determine precisely how much total dose is needed to compensate for the 7-day break to maintain the same biological effect on the tumor and ensure we don't compromise their chance of cure. This is a very common dilemma.
Okay, first step. We need to figure out the number of days of uncompensated growth. The standard treatment duration is 7 weeks, which is 49 days total. The kickoff time for accelerated repopulation is typically considered somewhere between day 21 and day 28. Let's use day 28 for this example. In this case, the patient's break occurred after week 4, which is day 28. So the entire 7-day break falls squarely within that accelerated repopulation period. It all counts. Therefore, this break adds 7 full days of uncompensated tumor growth that we need to account for with some additional dose.
Exactly. Next, we calculate the compensatory dose required. Using our mnemonic, repopulation rapid, 0.6 for the fix. We multiply the number of days of delay by 0.6 grays per day. So this is 7 days multiplied by 0.6 grays per day. 7 times 0.6. That equals 4.2 gray. This 4.2 gray is the additional dose we need to deliver somehow to counteract the tumor regrowth that likely occurred during that week-long break.
Right. And finally, we calculate the new total dose required to hopefully achieve the originally intended tumor control. This is simply the original planned dose of 70 gray, plus the compensatory dose we just calculated, 4.2 gray, which equals 74.2 gray. So to maintain the same biological effect on the tumor and effectively account for the repopulation, the total dose should ideally be increased to 74.2 gray. This calculation highlights precisely why minimizing treatment breaks in curative intent radiotherapy, especially for these rapidly proliferating tumors like head and neck, is so incredibly critical. Each day of delay can literally cost the patient in terms of tumor control, and this formula helps us quantify that cost and, importantly, make the necessary adjustments if a break is unavoidable.
Yeah, and it's not just about compensating for delays either. This concept also helps explain why approaches like accelerated fractionation, where we try to reduce the overall treatment time, maybe by giving more fractions per day or increasing the dose per fraction slightly, can be so effective for certain tumors. By delivering the radiation more quickly, we essentially minimize the time available for the tumor to repopulate, thereby increasing the effective biological dose delivered for a given physical dose. It's all about playing against the tumor's biology and its timeline.
All right, now that we've covered these core concepts and calculations, BED, ISO effect, repopulation, let's put your understanding to the test with a quick board blitz. These are exactly the types of questions that frequently appear on board exams, and mastering them really demonstrates a strong grasp of the fundamentals. So grab your mental scratch pad, or maybe a real one, and let's go.
Absolutely, let's do it. These questions are designed to challenge your application of the formulas and also your conceptual understanding. Getting these right consistently means you're definitely well on your way to acing the radiobiology section of your boards.
Excellent. Question 1. A late-responding normal tissue with an alpha to beta ratio of 3 gray is treated with 60 gray in 2 gray fractions. What is the biologically effective dose? Is it A, 60 gray, B, 80 gray, C, 100 gray, or D, 120 gray?
Okay, take a moment. The correct answer here is C, 100 gray. Let's walk through that calculation quickly. The total dose, D, is 60 gray. The dose per fraction, D, is 2 gray. The alpha-beta ratio is 3 gray. We use the BED formula. BED equals D multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus D divided by the alpha to beta ratio. So BED equals 60 multiplied by, open parent, 1 plus 2 divided by 3, close parent. 2 divided by 3 is about 0.667. So it becomes 60 multiplied by, open parent, 1 plus 0.667, close parent. That is 60 multiplied by 1.667, which equals exactly 100 gray using that alpha to beta of 3. Remember, for these late responding tissues, that low alpha beta value makes the delta beta term significant, really driving up the BED compared to the physical dose.
Perfect. Question 2. A standard spinal cord tolerance dose is 50 gray in 25 fractions of 2 grays. Using an alpha to beta ratio of 2 gray for the spinal cord, what total dose given in 50 fractions of 1 gray would be considered isoeffective? Is it A, 60 gray, B, 66.7 gray, C, 75 gray, or D, 100 gray?
Okay, this is an isoeffect problem. The correct answer is B, 66.7 gray. Let's break it down. First, we need to calculate the BED for the standard regimen, which is our tolerance limit. D 50G, D a 2G, alpha beta 2G. BED standard equals 50 multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus 2 divided by 2. That equals 50 multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus 1, so 50 multiplied by 2, which equals 100 gray. That's our target BED, our speed limit. Now we want to find the new total dose, let's call it D new, for a new dose per fraction of 1 gray. That will give us the same BED of 100. The BED for the new regimen will be D new multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus the new D, which is 1, divided by the alpha beta, which is still 2. So BED equals D new multiplied by, open parent, 1 plus 1 divided by 2, close parent. That's D new multiplied by 1 plus 0.5, or D new multiplied by 1.5. Now we set the two BED as equal. 100 equals D new multiplied by 1.5. Solving for D new, we divide 100 by 1.5. 100 divided by 1.5 gives us 66.666. So approximately 66.7 gray. The key here is setting the two BED expressions equal and carefully solving for the unknown total dose.
Nicely done. Question 3. A patient's head and neck cancer treatment is prolonged by 5 days beyond the planned 7-week course. Assuming accelerated repopulation began before the delay started, what is the approximate compensatory dose needed to maintain equivalent tumor control? Is it A, 1 gray, B, 3 gray, C, 5 gray, or D, 10 gray?
All right, this tests that rule of thumb. The correct answer is B, 3 grays. Remember our mnemonic, repopulation rapid, 0.6 for the fix. For rapidly proliferating tumors like head and neck cancers, for every day of delay beyond that kickoff time, which we assume happened here, we need to add about 0.6 gray. So for 5-day delay, we simply multiply 5 days by 0.6 grays per day. 5 times 0.6 equals 3 gray. That's the extra dose needed to compensate for the likely tumor repopulation during those 5 days. A common and often necessary adjustment in the clinic.
Excellent. And our final question, question 4. A tissue has a low alpha to beta ratio, for example, 3 gray. This tissue is A, an early responding tissue sensitive to changes in total dose, B, a late responding tissue sensitive to changes in dose per fraction, C, a tumor sensitive to changes in total dose, or D, a late responding tissue insensitive to changes in dose per fraction.
Okay, think about what low alpha beta means. The correct answer is B, a late responding tissue sensitive to changes in dose per fraction. Low alpha to beta ratios are the characteristic fingerprint, the signature of late responding tissues. When you look back at the BED formula D times 1 plus D, alpha beta, you can see that when the alpha to beta ratio in the denominator is small, the whole term D divided by the alpha beta ratio becomes much larger, much more significant. This means that the overall biological effect becomes highly dependent, highly sensitive to the fraction size, D. So even relatively small changes in fraction size will have a disproportionately significant impact on the biological damage to that late responding tissue. This is why conventional fractionation is so protective of them, and why hypofractionation must be approached with extreme caution when these organs are nearby.
Fantastic. So After this really comprehensive tour through fractionation calculations, what are the absolute critical clinical pearls, the key takeaways you absolutely must remember for your boards and, more importantly, for your daily practice? Let's try to distill it down.
Okay, pearl number one. You absolutely must be able to confidently and accurately apply the BED formula. Remember it. BED equals D, total dose, multiplied by the quantity of 1 plus lowercase d, dose per fraction, divided by the alpha to beta ratio. This is the cornerstone. It's the fundamental language of fractionation. Write it down, practice it, make it completely second nature. You'll use it constantly.
Pearl number 2. For isoeffect calculations, the core principle is unwavering. You set the BED of the first regimen equal to the BED of the second regimen. That's your method. This is how you find an equivalent total dose for a new fractionation scheme, and it's especially important, critically important, for rigorously respecting and managing normal tissue constraints and tolerances. This is how we push the envelope of dose escalation or hypofractionation safely.
Pearl number 3. Know your key alpha to beta ratios like the back of your hand. Seriously. For late responding normal tissues, that critical value is approximately 3 gray, although sometimes you'll see 2 grays used, especially in specific contexts for very sensitive organs like the spinal cord. And for early responding tissues and most tumors, remember that high alpha to beta ratio, typically around 10 grays. These values directly dictate how a tissue responds to changes in fraction size, and that informs almost all your clinical fractionation choices.
And pearl number 4. For fast-growing tumors, like those head and neck cancers we discussed, it's absolutely vital to remember that repopulation accelerates significantly after about 21 to 28 days into treatment. This accelerated repopulation requires a compensatory dose to maintain tumor control, which is approximately 0.6 gray per day of treatment prolongation. Don't forget that mnemonic, repopulation rapid, 0.6 for the fix. It's honestly a lifesaver on test day and definitely in the clinic when breaks happen.
And beyond just these specific pearls, I think we also saw today pretty clearly that simply making a schedule iso-effective for late effects doesn't automatically mean you've gained a therapeutic advantage or even maintained the same effect on the tumor. You have to check both. This kind of nuanced understanding of these calculations is incredibly crucial for designing modern hypofractionated trials, for instance. It ensures that you are truly escalating the BED to the tumor while staying safely within the BED tolerance for the critical normal tissues, thereby optimizing that all-important therapeutic ratio. It's this careful balance that really defines precision radiation oncology today.
Absolutely. These calculations, they're not merely theoretical exercises designed to make you sweat during an exam. They really form the quantitative backbone of modern radiation oncology. They empower us to move beyond just looking at physical dose measurements to truly understanding and predicting the biological impact on both healthy tissues and cancerous ones. And that allows for more precise, more personalized, and ultimately more effective treatment delivery. Mastery of these concepts is truly a hallmark of an outstanding radiation oncologist.
So as you reflect on today's deep dive into the numbers, maybe consider this. How might future advancements, perhaps in tumor biology or maybe functional imaging, allow for even more precise alpha to beta ratio determination, maybe for individual patients or even for different subregions within a single tumor? How might that further revolutionize how we apply these fractionation principles to truly personalize radiation therapy even more? The foundational math we discussed today, though, will absolutely still be the key.
Well said. Today, we've really tackled the essential calculations that drive fractionation decisions, hopefully empowering you to move from simply memorizing regimens to truly understanding their profound biological implications. We can now compare treatment schedules and understand their differential effects on tumors and normal tissues with, hopefully, a newfound confidence.
Indeed. And in our next calculation segment, which will be RadBio E39C, and we're calling it Calculations for Ratios and Decay, we will delve deeper into some other key comparative ratios. Things like RBE, that's relative biological effectiveness, OER, the oxygen enhancement ratio, and DRF, the dose reduction factor. And then we'll switch gears pretty significantly to the fundamental physics of radioactive decay, learning how to calculate remaining activity based on half-life, another absolutely critical concept in our field, especially for brachytherapy and radiopharmaceuticals.
And don't forget to head over and complete practice oral boards and review lots of additional materials at radoncsmartlearn.com. That's Rad Onc smartlearn.com, but it's pronounced radoncsmartlearn.com.
Yes, exactly. And be sure to subscribe to Rad Onc Smart Review for our next episode and many more to come. Thanks so much for tuning in.